Welcome everyone to this new episode of Let's Talk. I'm super happy to be here with Megan Lieu. Megan, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me here, Thomas.
I'm super happy to have you on the show. I have many questions, a lot related to data careers, dev role, your new role, also the fact that you've been creating content for some time. You have amazing SQL courses and more. So we'll get into all of that. But first of all, maybe for the people who might not know you, could you share a little bit? How would you describe yourself in a few sentences?
Yeah. I'm Megan, and the way that I would describe myself varies depending on who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to people who are not in tech, I will say that I work in marketing. If I talk to people who are in tech, I will say that I work in data science. In reality, I do a bit of both. I am in a somewhat like product marketing role at a data science company, but prior to this role, I was a data scientist. So, depending on who I'm talking to, I just want to make it easy on them because DevRel is not a super straightforward thing to understand, but I'm happy to dive into that later in this talk.
Right, we'll definitely ask you more about the DevRel role, and that's interesting that you start like that because I believe that in like when you tend to go like software engineer, statistics, data analyst, data scientist, it can get scary fast when we just share with close one that are not like in tech or something.
Exactly.
So I like how you, I like it. I might use it to be fair.
Yeah.
Like just I add value with numbers. Okay, so I just want to capture your vision at the moment, and then I would love to do a retrospective of what you've been doing and some insights on your career. But um, what are you trying to achieve today? So that's a very wide question, and I like to ask it. But could you answer it in any way you want?
What am I trying to achieve today? I would love to grow within the data science space, maybe take on leadership roles in the field because I really think that the field of data science is one that you and I are both very involved with, but there are nuances to working in data science that like other industries don't have, and I do like those nuances. Like we are first and foremost the ones who are at the forefront of like AI innovations,
Mm.
or the fact that, or just like the very unique aspects of the data community that I have been really entrenched into in like the past 3 years that make me think that this is the path for me. And so if I want to if I want to continue on this path, I really want to grow into a leadership role one day. I know that's super vague, but I have been an individual contributor for all three of my roles in the data space. I was a data analyst, then a data scientist, and now I'm in uh, DevRel. And each one of those learning experiences, I have kind of been the person who is doing the work day in and day out, working on the ground to do those like analyses or like writing blog content, right? Which is great, and I've learned a lot. But I think one day would love to try to empower other people to do the same. But this answer changes from day to day. Some days like I hate talking to people, and I'm like I could never be a manager, and then other days I'm like this is cool. Like I like being able to teach people things and being able to share my perspective to help others. So on those days, I'm like, yeah, I think a management role, a leadership role is the next step for me. So yeah, that's kind of where I would see myself in the next couple years. But things can change, and I could have a different vision another day. But as of right now, today, when you ask me that, I'm like, yeah, maybe a leadership role within the data space.
Makes sense. You reference different interesting things. Um, I believe that. I would like to transition directly to like a short a retrospective of what you've been doing so far. You mentioned that you were a data analyst and data scientist, and then DevRel. Um, could you maybe take us through this journey of like growing in this industry, and like what made you go from data analyst to data scientist and then to the DevRel? And we'll get into what is DevRel if some people are thinking about what the heck is DevRel.
Yeah. I transitioned into the data world from being a data analyst
Mm-hmm.
first. That came after I was working in finance as a financial analyst, and that field really just was not the one for me.
Mm-hmm.
Was super burnt out from it and was looking for my next journey. And that was a tough journey to embark on because at the time, all I had ever known was finance. And so had to figure out what my identity outside of finance was because I went to school for it, um, thought that was going to be my career, and then stuff happens and you're like, okay, I need to change my path. And I pivoted to data because I had taken a couple courses in college and I was like, data sounds cool and techy. Sounds like I can make money from this. And I have um, cut some skills in like SQL or like working with spreadsheets, working with visualization tools. So I guess I could do data. And so that transition took like 3 or 4 months, and then I became an analytics consultant or data analyst. And from there, I moved on to become a data scientist at a small data startup called Narrator, where I was there for a year and a half, and then from there came to this role as a data advocate. And the the kind of core ingredient in like the core factor that played a big part in
Mm-hmm.
all three of these jobs was my LinkedIn. I had been writing on LinkedIn consistently ever since I had started that data analyst role because I just wanted to share my story of how I made that transition and also share some of the thoughts I had um, from just like the daily struggles of the job, like things that I found funny,
Mm-hmm.
things that I found difficult that I wanted to just like talk about and just
Mm-hmm.
put out there because I really enjoyed
Mm-hmm.
writing. And I also started to enjoy connecting with people who had the same struggles or who went through the same kind of story. And that was what I was starting to attract as I put in more time in my LinkedIn. Um, Looking back, yeah, I've been writing on LinkedIn consistently for exactly 2 years now. I started November of 2021. And so when I did, I had, like I said, no intent to be an influencer or like make money out of it. I was just writing because I wanted to write about things that I found funny, things that I found difficult. And a lot of people resonated with it because I was never trying to be anybody who was like a super high up exec who had like a lot of power, right? Like I was just like, this is like my written diary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so people started to catch on to that, and then I slowly started to grow my platform. Now I'm up to like 86K, and it still feels like a really small number. I'm like, I should be at 100K by now, man. Like I'm so obsessed with getting to 100K, like it's bad. But um looking back, I'm like, I did kind of like amass a pretty big following over the course of 2 years. And this role got me to Deep Note because of that following that I had built. So my role now is very much like creating content, things that I was doing on the side just for myself on my
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn
Mm-hmm.
every day in my prior roles. I now get to do it as a full-time job, but I would not have been able to get this job if I didn't build up the platform to attract Deep Note to notice me in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's like I've kind of come full circle. Like I've put so much time into my writing and my platform
Mm-hmm.
that now it is like my full-time job,
Mm-hmm.
which can be hard sometimes because it writing on LinkedIn was just a side hobby, a passion project of mine, and now it's a full-time job. So you're always like, where do I draw the line between um, something that I'm passionate about versus something that I make money off of? And it's like, it's like, oh, like you love a certain restaurant, right? Like you like eating food at a restaurant. And then when you start to work there, you get sick of the food. And I hope that's not me, but it's like for people who follow in this same path to go work with to work in DevRel,
Mm-hmm.
they have this struggle too, where they're like, like I'm now doing something that was supposed to be a hobby and it's now a full-time job. So there's a lot of balancing there
Mm-hmm.
between like writing for yourself versus writing for your company that I'm still struggling to figure out because I've only been here for 2 months. But so far it's been very good.
Awesome. Thanks for this retrospective. It's a very interesting um, career path, starting from finance and going through different roles in data and ending up somehow with a very important following and being able to create content and add value in this way. So I would like to come back on the part where you started just posting things. So 2 years can sound big, but it's not that much of a time. Uh, like depends, I believe, the scale, but it is also quite impressive what you've achieved in this time frame. Um, and so my question would be, how did you get into like writing? So you said a little bit like posting and so on, but also I would love if you could share about what made you start your first courses.
Yeah,
um, that would be very interesting.
sure. That started because of a viral LinkedIn post I had. That viral LinkedIn post actually came in so handy at the perfect time because I made this one post one day that I didn't think anything of. And then next thing you know, it's almost at like 50,000 reactions.
Wow.
And I made it at a time when I was just starting to look for my second job in data. And when I made that post, I attracted so many employers to notice me, and one of them was who's the woman who would end up becoming my boss. Um, but another person who reached out to me after that post was a LinkedIn content manager, and she was like, "Hey, are you interested in creating a course with LinkedIn?" And at the time, I was like, "This has to be a scam. Like,
Hmm.
how are they? Like, why would they reach out to me?" I was like maybe like 5 to 6,000 followers at the time, and I was like, why do they want to talk to me? Um, After that post, I like it like doubled to like 11,000, right? But and so from that conversation, a couple months afterward, I recorded my first course,
Hmm.
and that was a course on SQL versus Python versus R
Hmm.
and the differences between those tools. So a pretty beginner friendly course that I recorded completely virtual or like remotely from my house. And
Okay.
then after that, that led into my second course, which was SQL for Finance. And SQL for Finance was my first like real course where I was flown out to LinkedIn to do that. And
Hmm.
that was almost exactly a year ago, and it was so fun, but so much work because, as I'm sure you know, when you create creative pieces that are seen by other people, like there are so many different factors to it, right? Like the script, how the video looks, how the sound is, right? Like and with LinkedIn, like they were actual professionals, and so the whole week that I was in the LinkedIn Learning studios, it was like all work. And so it was fun, but it was a lot of work to create that course and get it up and running. But it was worth it because that course now has 100, 105, somewhere between 105 and 110,000 learners.
Hmm.
And I never expected it to do that well because my first course didn't do that well. But apparently, a lot of finance folks want to learn SQL. And yeah, I learned a lot about that course in terms of like how what goes into instructional design, what goes into teaching people skills. But those lessons that I learned
Hmm.
absolutely equipped me for my current job, where part of my job is to educate users on how to use our product. So yeah, looking back, it was a lot of work, but it was worth it.
Awesome. This is a very fun journey. So coming back to the DevRel role, could you share a little bit more about your new company and like how does a DevRel role work? So I understand that it's creating content, part of it, like to show how to use a product. Correct me, I'll ask you right now, but yeah, I think I let you answer this question. But
Yeah.
how does that work, and how what do you do?
Yeah, I had somebody once who was like, "Oh, I thought your job was just writing content, like creating content on LinkedIn." And I was like, I make it seem that way because I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. But that's just one very small part of it. Um, Content is a huge part, but also creating the community around our product. And
Hmm.
that was part of what I was hired to do, which is um, get the broader data community to know
Hmm.
what Deep Note is, and build our own community.
Hmm.
So that means, jumping in conversations that are happening on like Reddit, Hacker News, Twitter. It also means running events for the community, like meetups, and going to speak at conferences and making connections at those events. Um, those kinds of events were things that I had never done before.
Hmm.
Like coordinating data dinners and speaking at these conferences on super technical talks. Like I had never done any of that before. And over the past month, I've started to lean into that. And it is super nerve wracking, especially if you've never done it before, to
Hmm.
be in such a public facing role. Especially if you are, so for me, my strength was in written communication,
Hmm.
and verbal communication like you and I are doing was not something that I had ever done in any other roles.
Hmm.
So it was the process of transitioning my written skills into other forms of communication, that was like the hardest thing for me to pick up on, that people underestimate when you're thinking of DevRel roles, because you're not
Right.
just creating content,
Hmm.
or you're not just going out on talks, or you're not just creating YouTube videos, right? There, for a lot of people, they're in DevRel roles where they're the only DevRel person or
Hmm.
developer advocate at their job, and so they're expected to do all of these things. And yeah, had to pick up on a lot of different skills like video editing, digital marketing, SEO, um, event planning, like like designing assets that would be shared on, like designing assets through Figma, and
Hmm.
creating a picture for a post, right? Like I was like, I thought I was just here to write, um, which is what I love to do. But apparently, there are a lot of other things around writing,
Hmm.
that are involved in the process when you are in an outward facing role like this that
Hmm.
people don't often know about. So it's not just like, it's DevRel is so many different things. And one DevRel person could be doing like different part, like they could be focused on just like maybe just blog content and going to conferences, and a different DevRel person could be more focused on participating in conversations that are happening on social media that the company is part of,
Hmm.
or like different DevRel have different responsibilities in different companies, and that's just because it's a very new field, very niche field, that not many people have a very defined understanding of. And so it could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people depending on the company.
Right. Makes sense. That's very interesting because I believe that the role can be a very creative role in a way that I mean what you want is impact metrics of the company, and so based on those metrics you can take specific actions that are not necessarily what we could expect coming from
Mhm.
data analyst role or data scientist role, like you mentioned, like some marketing tasks or working on designs and a branding. I wasn't aware of the events and so on. So
Mhm.
that's very interesting. Um, that's very interesting role. I would like to ask you about your unique vision on finance and data. So you have an interesting. You've seen both. You're from a finance background and you switched to data, like you said before. So I wanted to ask you about what are like the main things, the main difference. Maybe not differences, but the main things that you've seen as in finance, in data, and like if finance people are getting up to date with SQL or technology or not. Like, do you have some insights regarding those two industries?
Yeah. By and large, my experience with data has been mostly spreadsheets. And that was like the primary tool that I had used when I was a financial analyst was using Excel.
Mm.
Um, Towards the end of my time as a financial analyst, my company was like, oh, we should learn more about data analytics. And I was
Mm.
like, what does that mean? Like, learn more about data analytics? Like, there's so many different things that are involved in data analytics, right? So,
Mhm.
in my company at the time, they were like, that means we'll learn Power BI. And I was like, okay. And so we like had one project where we were working on Power BI and like one training that the whole company had to participate in about, or our whole team had to participate in to learn about what Power BI was. And at the
Mhm.
time, I was like, oh yeah, like, so data analytics is just Power BI. And that was because I was coming from this world where Excel was everything. And so applying that knowledge from Excel, exclusively Excel, to later on the data stack that I had when I was an analytics consultant, that was not too far of a jump because during that time I was still using a lot of Excel, but we used a bunch of SQL as well, Tableau, Power BI, Python, R, right? And all of those things I had a better understanding of because I came from the foundation of spreadsheets and tabular data that I had kind of taken for granted when I was a financial analyst. I was like, oh, it's just Excel, right? Like everybody in the world knows how to use Excel. That's actually
Mm.
false. Not everybody knows how to use Excel.
Mm.
And you can learn a lot from Excel in terms of how to conceptualize tables and like databases and warehouses.
Mm.
You can have a better understanding of that if you come from a foundation of using Excel.
Mhm.
That I had I had underestimated that. I had underestimated the value of knowing Excel until afterward.
Mhm.
And so, in terms of tooling, they're not completely the same, but there are bridges between what a financial analyst's tool stack looks like compared to a data analyst, for say. And at the end of the day, they're both analysts, right? You're doing the work to, as you said, find value in numbers, and you're communicating that to business stakeholders. That is a commonality for both financial analysts and data analysts.
Mhm.
And so when you look at the two fields, or if you look at any two fields, right, you can most likely find those transitionary skills that apply to both that you can
Mhm.
speak to. That sorry, transferable skills. That's what I was looking for.
Mhm.
Um, so like for anybody that I had spoken to who wanted to know how to make that transition from finance to data, I'm like, think about those skills that apply to both fields and talk about how you can apply the skills that you learn from finance into data. And when you think about it that way, like there are actually so many transferable skills that you could talk about because like I said, at the end of the day, they're both analysts and they're both making sense of numbers and they're both telling stories to stakeholders.
Mhm.
Um, and so when you look at it that way, there really is not that the line between like finance and data is like not that big.
Mhm. Makes sense. Um, and I like what you said about like Excel or spreadsheets gives you a very good understanding of how, like, when then you're thinking about your data model, or if you're thinking about how your tables are or how do they look, they like playing sometimes on Excel and putting down concepts, or like just trying, like if I struggle with a problem and I just open a spreadsheet and I just start putting things on the Excel and I just like start reasoning with a spreadsheet, it's very powerful. And
Yeah,
so, and that's, and all the concepts that we can see here can apply to when we're going on SQL, Power BI, or when we're doing data modeling and so on. That's very
absolutely.
interesting. And I also like what you mentioned about the bridges between this industry. I believe that the financial industry can be a bit late, sort of speak, in terms of like adopting technology and improving. I mean, automating things. I believe
Yeah,
that a lot of the work could be automated and provide more space to do more things. But that's very interesting, and that's for sure something that I think is a message worth sharing, which is that
Mhm.
people from finance can go to data and learn whatever they need on the go, because a lot of the skills can be transferred.
Yeah.
Super interesting. I'd like to ask you two things. I'd like to ask you a bit further on regarding Deep Note and what the company is doing and so on. And I would like to ask you about content creation in general. Which one do you prefer to do first?
Let's do the deep note one.
Perfect.
Um, at
I
deep
mean,
note.
if you
Oh
want,
yeah,
if you
go
want,
ahead.
I
Go ahead.
can. No, no, sorry, I'm sorry. My question regarding Deep Note is like, what is Deep Note? And then, well, first of all, let's start with what is Deep Note.
Sure. At Deep Note, we are helping data scientists tackle their hardest problems. And by hardest problems, that might not mean the most advanced machine learning projects or like the most cutting edge applications of AI.
Mm-hmm.
Often, what we're finding to be the hardest problems are like organization of their data infrastructure
Mm-hmm.
or simply being able to collaborate with non-data personas in their business. And those things sound simple when you
Mm-hmm.
compare it to like the latest trends in AI or like machine learning, right? Like they don't sound sexy, but actually a lot of teams struggle with being able to um, first get up and running and set up their data infrastructure and know the most efficient ways to coordinate their data pipelines so that they can create cohesive analyses to deliver to their business stakeholders. But also knowing how to share the work, the very hard work that they do, knowing how to share that work with um, people outside of their team. Because if you can't demonstrate the value that you have to the business, what good are you, right? And a lot of data scientists fall into this trap of thinking, hey, more fancy, more complex models, the sexier it sounds, the better. But actually, like, they're digging themselves into this hole where nobody understands their value, nobody understands what they're doing, and like that's when you become a cost center instead of a value center. And so the problem of how do you democratize the data insights that come from data science teams to the rest of the business, that collaboration problem is what we're trying to tackle at the core. That most people do not think is a very hard problem to tackle, but in fact there are a lot of roadblocks to um, making sure that an entire organization is on the same page as the data organization,
Mm-hmm.
um, because maybe the data science teams themselves don't want to be they don't want to like democratize their insights because they think like we're holier than thou or like we're doing things that you guys would never understand, right? But that's such a bad mentality because um, you're not you're not demonstrating your value to the business. Like you can't, I don't know, like be a team player if you are not able to explain your findings to the rest
Mhm.
of the company. And
Mhm.
so that's what Deep Note has set out to do. It's to create this really collaborative product that makes it easy for data scientists and non-data folks to communicate and speak the same terms, regardless of everybody's tech skills, their
Mhm.
technical skills. Um, and by creating a cloud-based collaborative notebook that is a workaround to a lot of the issues that like Jupyter notebooks have, for example, where Jupyter notebooks, like you can't have multiple people work in the same document at the same time,
Mhm.
or you have to upload your notebook into GitHub and hope that your audience knows how to navigate GitHub to then download your notebook and then be able to run that notebook in their local machine. But then they might encounter like environment setup issues, right? Like all of those reasons that people hate Jupyter notebooks is what we're trying to do much better at. And for the most part, that is like that. For the most part, the issue that we're struggling with there is um, people being willing to try new things because Jupyter Notebooks is like so ubiquitous in data scientists' workflows.
Mhm.
And so often they don't want to let go of these tools that they've been using for a very long time or try
Mhm.
anything new.
Mhm.
Um, but when they do, they find that collaboration is much easier. Their workflows are much simpler because they don't have to worry about converting your Jupyter notebook into a PDF and like
Mhm.
sending that PDF to your boss, right?
Yeah.
A lot of those frictions that come in the process of being able to like just share your findings. We're trying to tackle those things, and that's what we think is one of the biggest inhibitors to data scientists being able to just do the work that they're meant to be doing.
Hmm. Awesome. Makes sense. I really like this mission is something that I've heard a lot through times and seems very problematic, which is um, this kind of judgments between technical people and business people,
Yes.
and this is something very recurrent and somehow sad because I believe that just out of ego we lose so much value and we
Mm,
lose so much time also, uh, because everyone is playing defense and
mm.
not making much problems. So I think that's a huge important problem to tackle. And so in the project, how do you like facilitate these gaps between the two roles?
Yeah. So without getting too in the weeds of like all of our features, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, in Deep Note, you have one place where you can work with Python, SQL, and no code visualization blocks. Um, that no code visualization piece
Mm-hmm.
is huge because you can easily run that on top of the data frames that were created out of your Python code or your
Mm-hmm.
SQL queries.
Mm-hmm.
And build beautiful plots out of them simply by dragging and dropping. And
Mm-hmm.
so that piece alone already helps a lot in bringing in business personas into the data science workflow,
Yeah.
because now these business people are not like handcuffed to only be able to work at the mercy of the people who did the coding, right? Because now
Mm-hmm.
build they can build these visualizations out of it. But also we have apps, and apps are the polished interface that sits on top of the assembled notebook, where you can say, hey, I want this and this and this part of my notebook, and I want to show it in this polished interface that is interactive, that you can easily hand over. You can share it with a link to your business stakeholders and they can just play around with the app. Like one of our most popular apps on Deep Note was somebody created like a time to sunburn calculator where you put in like, where do you live, what is your like skin tone, how much time do you normally spend out in the sun, and you can like click it and it'll generate like how much time you can sit out in the sun without needing sunscreen.
Mhm.
And that app, if you were to look under the covers, it's like this this complex notebook where to data scientists it makes sense, right? Like you have all of these inputs into whatever machine learning model it's using, but then when you see it in the app, um, it's just this simple clickable interface where anybody understands it. And so that app layer is another big answer for us
Mhm.
when it comes to the question of how do you bridge the business folks and the data folks to be able to collaborate on the same thing and be on the same page when it comes to data projects. Um, apps are that thing that apps are our stickiness point where we didn't know how much value the apps would bring until we started seeing people report like, hey, this makes it so much easier to work with our business stakeholders, and like now we can't stop using apps because people outside of data, like they expect apps from us now. They don't
Mhm.
expect notebooks where you see all this code, right? They want something that is much simpler and much more beautiful to work with, and that's the solution that we have for breaking down the barriers for full data literacy.
Hmm. Makes sense. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I believe that like not showing any code is sometimes the best way, because just by like getting into a notebook we can just create a like scare some people and maybe like lose a bit of the attention and then lose the power of the message or what we're trying to communicate or relying on. Awesome. I'll ask you, I think, one of my last questions I would like to ask you. It's like about content creation, right? So could you share maybe a little bit um, your view on content creation? You've been creating content for 2 years on LinkedIn now. You have a very impressive community and you produce a lot of content, both out of passion and interest, and some of it's also regarding your company. So, how do you view content creation, and do you have tips for people who are trying to communicate their growth on LinkedIn and sharing what they learn?
Yeah. Content creation gets a bad rap. I think people say content creators are like this cringy thing and they're just out to like make money off of it and like sell ads and whatnot. Content creation gets a bad rap, but at the end of the day, content creation was my form of expressing myself. Like I had mentioned before, I really liked writing and sharing my thoughts on a platform where people just get it, people understand what I'm saying, because they share the same passions. And at the end of the day, that is the why on why I continue to create content. Um, and sure, yeah, like I've had collaboration deals and sponsorships that have come from it, and that's nice, but they're not why I do it. And so for anybody else who is considering content creation, don't think about it from like, hey, what money can I earn from this? Like, what influence can I earn from this? Um, think about like why you want to do it in the first place, because content creation is something that takes so much time. Like um it is not something like, especially consistent content creation to the point where you want to have like a decent following, it takes time, so you have to think about whether it is worth the time, because you will likely have so many more flopped posts than posts that actually do well. And so you have to dig deep and ask yourself, like, why am I doing this? Because a lot of days you're going to be questioning that why. And you're going to have to be thinking back to, like, why did I start this in the first place? Like, nobody's reading my stuff. This post absolutely tanked. Like, and so I ask myself that all the time. But yeah, like for me, it was just the desire to communicate myself in a way that I enjoyed, which was writing, and communicating myself in a way that others relate to. So that is my why, and it's not to like have this influence. It's not to like end up on Times Square billboards like I did. It's a lot simpler reason. So I encourage people who are considering it to understand that it takes a lot of time. It's a lot of work, and it is absolutely like my side job that takes up a lot of hours every single night. Um, and so you have to think about the reasons that make it worth it.
Hmm. Awesome. Awesome. So like find a good why before you start putting things out there.
Yeah.
Um, and
And to add to that, like I know I didn't get into the details of like how often you have to write or like what you should write or like the intricacies of that, but like
mhm,
when you understand your why, I think it makes it so much easier to actually execute. Because if you're like if you know that, hey, it's like I'm writing because I want to build my business, or I'm writing because I want to become an expert in my field, that will inform your voice. It'll inform
mhm.
what you write. And it'll like give you that clearer vision to actually execute. But you do have to start with like, why do I want to create content in the first place?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that applies to a lot of things in general, like projects and like having these metrics. Like, what are we trying to achieve here? And I believe that having the why is very important because we can then decide if some content is aligned with our principles. So I believe that having a set of principles that we determine to be, okay, this is why I'm starting to share, because like you said, I believe that very few people start talking about a specific subject, and like from a day to another, like thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are like very engaged with the content and learning, uh, or maybe someone with a lot of experience that just started but like he's a legend in the field or something. But
Right.
I guess that I've heard also that uh, when like we see younger profile, I've heard like, all right, but I have nothing to say, or I have no expertise to share. And I believe
Yeah.
that like what you did, and that is very inspiring, is like uh, you weren't like 20 plus years of expertise in a domain, but you just took the pains that you were having at the time and you just
Exactly.
shared about it, and in a consistent way,
Yeah.
and somehow it ended up being on a billboard.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, at no point was I like I'm an expert in this field. Like in fact, when I was first beginning, I was just like, guys, I'm 2 months into this field. Like guys, I'm less than a year into this field. Like I was very explicit that like I am not a pro and you should not view me as a pro. You should not like put me on any kind of pedestal because that puts a lot of pressure on me. So being real has a lot of benefits because people will relate to you. And I told this to um, some people I was educating. I was educating some people at my company on why it's important for you to build up a personal brand. And I was like, most people will connect with you not because of your expertise, but because of who you are as a human. Because that is what social media platforms are. It's to connect human beings. Um, it's not for you to like connect with a celebrity, right?
mhm,
So got
mhm.
to think about that when you're on social media in general.
Makes sense. I like to think in frames of like 10 or 20 years. And like, I believe, all right, could I do this like for the next 10 years? And if that is the response is maybe, then yeah, I think
Mm,
I might be on something interesting, because then, like you said, social media, I think we get the best value out of it when we can have accountability through time, and maybe people will see you sometime 1 year, and they'll see you at some other time, and then they'll see you again at some event, and it's compounding effect, and then at some point you
right.
end up having a lot of expertise, and people have seen you grow kind of and
Yeah.
share uh, either it's on a day to day or year to year. Two last questions, that would be the first one. How can people reach out and know more about you? Like, is it LinkedIn, or do you have website, blog? What do you have?
Just my LinkedIn for now, and starting to grow my TikTok. Shameless plug for that. It's Megan Loves Data on there. So if you like reading what I write about, sometimes I talk about it on my TikTok. So TikTok and LinkedIn are how you can reach me.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Megan, for taking the time to coming on the show. My last question is, do you have a message for the Let's Talk AI community? It can be about life, about anything professional, but do you have one last word that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, my last message is that the data community is a very tight knit one, but it's super supportive. And I've only recently realized that because I've been going to a lot of conferences and meeting these people in person, you realize how small this world is, but how willing they are to stick out their necks for you and find you opportunities. I found that out when I went through my last job search. I was let go from my last job, and then I put out a message on LinkedIn saying that I was back on the job market, and that message alone like connected me with so many people who are like strangers willing to help out. And I think um that is something that's very unique about the data community, is that like because we're in such a niche field, um you're probably connected to everybody in like however many degrees of separation, right? And so I really encourage people to build their network, if you are in this field, because there are so many benefits to it. You will find those people who are so willing to help out, and help you grow, that you would not be able to if you didn't put a conscious effort into building your network. So do it, especially, I mean, that's a piece of advice for everybody, but
Mhm.
especially in the data field. And you will see the benefits of it, and I really have been seeing the benefits of that lately.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for your time, Megan. I had an amazing time. Thanks for sharing all of this, and I wish you to have a wonderful day.
Yeah, same to you, Thomas. Thanks for inviting me for this chat.